Welcome to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. And now your host, Tim Johnson.
We'll visit with Brandy Christian, President and CEO of the Port of New Orleans, when we return on this edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Louisiana businesses, by partnering with your local community and technical college foundation, you're guaranteed a skilled, highly competent workforce, homegrown talent, trained specifically to meet your needs, whatever those needs are. Visit this website to learn more about how to partner with your local Louisiana Community and Technical College Foundation. To better prepare for tomorrow, become a partner today.
Louisiana has over 26,000 licensed companies that do business legally and meet the needs of our state. Before selecting a contractor, check references and verify the license at lacontractor.org. It's your money, make wise decisions, and protect yourself from being scammed.
Growing up in Baton Rouge, I used to always pass up ExxonMobil, but I never thought that I would actually have the opportunity to get on. But what I thought was impossible turned out to be possible. So I just feel like it's just a wonderful opportunity to be able to provide for my family.
We are committed to being a community partner. We are actively working to recruit the talent here in Baton Rouge, and we want to bring them into our workforce. We're ready.
Protect yourself from the headaches of dealing with a non-licensed contractor. Go to lacontractor.org and make sure the person or company who wants to work for you is licensed by the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors. It's your money. Make wise decisions and protect yourself.
For 8 seconds in the arena before an afternoon in the field. For a promise to students that honors success in the classroom. For championships earned on the bayou. For innovators committed to reclaiming our coastline. The Universities of Louisiana. For your future. For our future.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Brandy Christian, who is President and CEO of the Port of New Orleans, is my guest. You and I have gotten to know each other a little bit over the course of the last year. It's the first time we've had the privilege of having you on the show. I welcome you.
Well, thank you for having me.
Glad you're here. Lots to talk about, too, because the port plays a critical role in not just the economy of the greater New Orleans area or Louisiana, but quite frankly, the Gulf Coast and the nation. We'll get into some of that. Brandy, we always start with a little bit of personal and human interest, right? We need to get to know those folks who are leading those critically important elements of our economy, and certainly we mentioned how critically important the Port of New Orleans is. Talk a little bit about your background, your education, your family, and really the path that led you to your current position.
Certainly. Well, again, thank you for having me here today. I've been here in New Orleans, leading the Port of New Orleans for about 7 years.
Wow.
I joined the Port of New Orleans after about 25 years in public service and I jumped at the opportunity to join the Port of New Orleans after about 15 years with the West Coast ports. Opportunity came up with the Port of New Orleans to work on the Mississippi River. People often ask me, how could I have possibly left Southern California with perfect weather? But when you look at the maritime industry and the opportunity and the shifting growth and opportunity in the Gulf, particularly when you turn on your television set and you see what's happening in supply chain, the Gulf is really well poised. And I saw that over the last 5-7 years. The Mississippi River really, when you look at just the history and the future, the river is really something to contend with. And from a maritime perspective, it was just a dream.
Sort of the Holy Grail, right?
It really is. And so for me, being in the industry for 25 years, it really has just been phenomenal. I started out my maritime profession focused on the cruise business, kind of evolved into the cargo business. So spent about 15 years with the Port of San Diego. Joined the Port of New Orleans as the Chief Operating Officer, and a little over 5 years ago became the Chief Executive Officer. About 25 years in the industry. Prior to that, was in the Los Angeles area in in the public sector. So prior to that, my education was on the West Coast, University of Arizona, University of Southern California, with degrees in public administration. Just always had a passion for public administration. Think that it's vitally important as a public administrator. When you look at what we do in public policy, really the maritime industry in the port is extremely important of how we move goods through this country, and I think we're seeing it today.
We're going to get into a lot of that, but the fact that you came from the Gulf, from the West Coast to the Gulf Coast, based on that geography of the Mississippi River and the Gulf of Mexico and a lot of those things, I know from firsthand experience that Louisiana is fortunate to have attracted you here and the good work that you do. You mentioned the Mississippi River, and it's one of the things we talk about a lot on this show, is some of the things that make Louisiana unique and different and special, quite frankly. I say it all the time that if you think about what occurs naturally here in Louisiana in terms of our culture and our fertile farmland and our oil and gas resources, and the fact that 30% of the nation's energy supply comes through our coast, and we've got this petrochemical and refining industry that brings all this science and technology here. And to top it all off, we sit at the mouth of the greatest economic transportation artery in the Western Hemisphere, right? If we can get our political act together here, this would be a hard place to compete with in terms of job creation, quality of life, and all of those things. Those are the things that you focus on a lot. Talk about the port. Give us an overview, right? I think most people who would watch the Louisiana Business and Industry Show would have some idea of the Port of New Orleans, but I'm not sure that they fully understand the significance. So start with what the port is and what it does, and then we'll talk about the economic impact.
Well, the Port of New Orleans, it's kind of a misnomer by our name because we're Port of New Orleans. We actually have jurisdiction of 3 parishes: Orleans Parish, Jefferson Parish, and St. Bernard Parish. And our facilities are kind of scattered throughout those 3 parishes with terminals and tenant leaseholds that do everything across 4 lines of business. So cargo activities that are either containerized or non-containerized. And that's with public terminals that we operate through landlord relationships. And we move everything from containerized goods to non-containerized, one of the biggest movers of natural products like steel, rubber, all of those goods that literally move all the way up the Mississippi River into the inland states, as you mentioned. But then a number of those leaseholds, they take those products and they do warehousing, packaging, fabrication. They go to mills, they go to factories to be manufactured. But then we also have a number of real estate leaseholds, as well as we operate the cruise terminals. We are the 6th busiest cruise terminal in the country. So obviously have a huge tourism footprint. We also own and operate, back in 2018, we bought the New Orleans Public Belt Railroad, which does all of the switching for the 6 Class 1 railroads that move throughout the entire United States. So we are one of the probably most diverse ports within the country, very diverse. But what is really important to understand is when you kind of say the Port of New Orleans, is that all of those products that are moving through New Orleans, yes, the facilities sit in New Orleans, but the companies that reside all the way throughout the state of Louisiana, they depend on the facilities to either get the products that are vital to their manufacturing, to be able to produce their products or to get their products to market. So for example, you mentioned the petrochemical plants. A big reason they decide to put their factory or the manufacturing plant in Louisiana is natural gas, but also they have to be able to get their product to a foreign market. They do that through the Port of New Orleans container facilities or the poultry farms throughout the state of Louisiana, northern Louisiana. They ship their frozen poultry through the Port of New Orleans.
So when you think about economics in Louisiana, you really touch a lot of bases. We'll take a break. We'll come back and want to focus on the overall economic impact that the port has on the region. We're visiting with Brandy Christian. She's the president and CEO of the Port of New Orleans. You're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Shell, the rhythm of Louisiana.
As humankind faces its most critical challenges yet, the world demands leaders, and LSU is taking up the charge. The research we do here goes everywhere to protect communities threatened by climate change, so you can live your life with fewer worries about tomorrow. We're formulating a better way for everyone, because at LSU, our calling is humanity.
Plants would not be operating if they weren't operating under the regulations to keep everybody safe and keep the environment safe.
It also goes back to the end products that our raw materials go into. Solar panels, windmills.
Reusable bottles. Primary product is acrylonitrile, which is used to make carbon fiber.
Carbon fiber in an airplane is used to make it lighter.
By reducing weight, we indirectly help the environment because it uses less fuel. And for us to make products that help reduce carbon footprint, it's a big deal.
Shell, the rhythm of Louisiana.
So, how can I help you today? Maybe you're looking for a bigger home. Maybe you have plans to grow your business. Or maybe all your plans have just changed. For the better. Whether you're planning for the future or just looking for a bank that cares about you. If you have a goal, let's make it happen.
This is what you're looking for.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Brandy Christian of the Port of New Orleans is our guest. Brandy, you did a nice job sort of overviewing what the port does. You and I have had a number of conversations about the critically important economic impact of the port, not just in Greater New Orleans, not just in Louisiana, not just the Gulf Coast, but really nationally. Talk about jobs and economic input and how important the port is to all of those factors for the state and for the region.
Absolutely. You know, the port really is a catalyst. Our job is to deliver infrastructure at the end of the day. The terminal is the catalyst, and it generates activity. Obviously, through the terminal, there is significant jobs that are created on the terminal, but it's also all of those jobs, direct and indirect, that service the terminal. But it's also all of the warehouses, the packagers, the manufacturers, the truck drivers, that are really employed because of those facilities. Just within the state, there's over 20,000 jobs that are related to the Port of New Orleans.
20,000 jobs
over
in Louisiana
20,000 jobs. And what we're most proud of is the quality of the jobs and the diversity of the jobs. The LSU economic impact study that we did just prior to COVID, the average maritime port-related job pays 51% higher than the local average job.
Wow.
That's extremely important to us. It's the quality of the job, but also the diversity of the job. So they actually took out the highest paying jobs, the executive job, but that's the average job. And these are jobs that are, a trades job, somebody without a college degree to somebody with a college degree. So that's extremely important because when you look at the geography of the state as well as the different educational levels, there's really opportunity for a wide variety of skill sets within the region. So that's extremely important.
Yeah, and that impact, as we talked about, all up and down the Mississippi River, that multiplier effect on jobs. You mentioned whether you have a college degree or an industry-based certification or technical training, you're eligible. One of the interesting stats that we talk about a lot is that 80% of the jobs that exist in Louisiana's economy require something less than a 4-year college degree to access them, and the port provides really good opportunity for a lot of those folks. Everyone who's watching this show, everyone who goes to the grocery store, everyone who tries to buy an automobile, very familiar today, not only with inflation and all of the things that we're seeing there, but these supply chain issues, right? These logistics issues. Interestingly enough, I was going to fry some shrimp for my family Sunday night. I had to go 3 grocery stores to find cooking oil. Yep. That's the kind of, real life, real world results of these supply chain issues that we're seeing. What's your perspective on that, Brandy?
It's very real, and I think is individuals in households started to feel it with COVID, felt that panic of getting to the grocery store, will the shelves be full? That demand definitely started during COVID, and it's really what we're seeing when you turn on your TV and you're seeing ships backed up on the West Coast and now going to the East Coast, and you're seeing that congestion in ports like Houston. What is driving that is really e-commerce. And so where you're seeing ports congested is ports that have imports. They're basically services that are coming in from primarily Asia, and it's due to demand for imports coming in from e-commerce. And predictions are this is not going to slow down. As I often tell people, my front porch is very symptomatic of it. It's e-commerce. The demand's not going to go away. They're definitely saying this will continue to be an issue probably through 2025. What is great about that is that it just opens opportunity in two respects for the Gulf. The shift of volume to ports in the Gulf and the East Coast from the West Coast, we've seen that. The Port of New Orleans, we have grown twofold in the last 10 years. We've had double-digit growth, and that really has driven our demand for a second container terminal is because of that growth. What it's also done is cause the ocean carriers, the companies with building the container vessels, to continue to build bigger vessels because they have to put more containers on because of this demand. And where you're seeing ports grow the fastest are those ports or those states that have a lot of imports. One of the challenges that Louisiana has had is that we are actually very rare. We are an export state because we have petrochemicals and we have poultry. Now, you often hear the President of the United States and a lot of politicians talk about, we need more manufacturing, we need more exports. Louisiana is pretty rare, we have that. We need more imports. We're not a big population, we don't have a lot of distribution centers. This really creates an opportunity for Louisiana.
Well, and let's talk about that because we've got about 45 seconds left in this segment. I want to carry it over to the next segment. But you guys are developing, because of that demand and because of competition, quite frankly, plans for a very exciting additional container terminal in St. Bernard Parish in the town of Violet. So give us a brief overview of what you're developing there and why it's so critically important.
Absolutely. It's critical for two reasons. Because of the demand for larger vessels. Currently, our container terminal in New Orleans, as I mentioned, we've had double-digit growth. We're outgrowing that facility both by ship size. We're basically limited on vessels that can get under the Crescent Connection Bridge. Those vessels call Houston, Mobile, and New Orleans. Soon they won't be able to call New Orleans. So that obviously limits the capability for Louisiana to remain in the business. What's also important is that means that Louisiana and each of us will no longer be able to have the service provided. We would have to wait for all of our containers, all of our goods to get service to Louisiana after all the population of Texas, Mississippi, and Alabama. We'd have to wait for those to come through those other ports in other states.
Well, it's critically important to competition for the Port of New Orleans. It's critically important to Louisiana's economy. We come back from this break. I want to get into why St. Bernard, what the advantages are at that location, and some of the commitments you guys have made to that community. We're visiting with Brandy Christian. She's the CEO of the Port of New Orleans. You're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Brandy Christian, the president and CEO of the Port of New Orleans, is our guest. Brandy, we talked about this new exciting project that you guys are developing, this new container terminal that could potentially go into St. Bernard Parish at Violet. And we talked about the competition and the need for this. You use a really interesting analogy about why this is so important and why this new terminal is critical to the port.
You know, people don't always understand ports, but we understand airports and we understand airplanes because we use them every day as average citizens. But an ocean carrier is just like an airplane is you need to fill that airplane in both directions. It needs to be full in both directions. Same with an ocean carrier. They travel 30 days from Asia and they need it full in both directions with imports and exports. And in Louisiana, we're 70% exports. So they need more imports coming in. And we need more imports coming into the state. And our real opportunity is to get imports. We're not a big population. That's how you get imports. You're servicing a population, is distribution centers. And the demand with e-commerce is driving distribution centers. And what's happening on the West Coast is all these retailers are looking for options. They're looking for gateways. The Mississippi River in New Orleans, because of the gateway that we are, we have that ability to attract those distribution centers. And with the announcement of St. Bernard and us putting that kind of infrastructure in place, and because of the natural gateway that we are, has brought that attention of retailers and distribution centers. So really, we have that opportunity to fill up that airplane or that ship with imports. So not only do we create the economic impact and the jobs for the terminal, but also bringing in those distribution centers and manufacturers. Because at the end of the day, to stay competitive as a state, they're looking to make sure that you as a state have the infrastructure just as the same. You're not going to attract a Fortune 500 company if you don't have an international airport. If you don't have an international container terminal, you're not going to compete or even retain your manufacturers or even compete for a distribution center.
You chose Violet in St. Bernard Parish for a number of reasons. It sets up to be really the ideal location for this sort of terminal. Talk about why.
Absolutely. Obviously, we have studied, a number of entities have studied the best location for the next container terminal. It's obviously got to be downriver of the bridge for air draft, for larger vessels. Now that we have 50-foot draft, we have the depth of the river, but now it's really looking at a couple of things. What was most important to us, to our terminal operators, and to the industry was flood protection.
Sure.
That is something that we learned after every study with Katrina and was validated by IDA. St. Bernard Parish is the only parish within the $14 billion flood protection. That was the number one priority. Also, Violet is an existing maritime facility, naturally deep, 50 feet at berth, and that was extremely important. It can take the largest vessels within the industry. The reality is the large vessels, 20,000, 20-foot TEU vessels, they're going to go to the East Coast, West Coast. 10,000 to 14,000 is really what is destined for the Mississippi River for the Gulf. That's what we're focused on for the Mississippi River. That's what really will be designed and focused on for our market. But equally important was the access to the New Orleans Gateway transportation system. It is, when you talk about distribution, getting to manufacturers, getting to the inland transportation system, to the I-12, to the I-10, that was extremely important. So the opportunity to have that connection to the interstate system was extremely important. And our ability to make further investment into transportation systems and infrastructure in a timely way was extremely important.
You mentioned infrastructure because that's one of the commitments you've made to St. Bernard Parish. There have been infrastructure needs in that parish long before we started talking about putting a terminal there. And this terminal, this project, this critically important economic driver can be a catalyst for the people of St. Bernard Parish to finally realize some of that desperately needed infrastructures that they've looked for 30 years.
Absolutely. And when you think about the infrastructure that it takes to not only build a terminal, but build the infrastructure that supports the community as well as the terminal to completely start from scratch. If you can imagine building road and rail all the way to the end of the mouth of the river, that would take decades and decades. But to be able to already have an inland transportation system and now add infrastructure that will not only support the terminal, but also enhance the infrastructure for the community is an extremely great opportunity.
It's a real win-win. We got about a minute left here. You guys have been really engaged in the St. Bernard community, particularly the Violet community. You're talking about economic impact and jobs that can be transformational for that community. You're talking about schools and helping with education. Just in 30 seconds, Brandy, talk about your commitment to the community and making sure that the community is a partner in this process.
Well, in beginning the project, we actually started with opening a local office and setting up community advisory committees, both in Violet and St. Bernard Parish, so that we can begin with getting their direct input on how those programs would look, both from the job creation to the potential relocation of the school, the park, et cetera, to hear from them their priorities. And at the end of the day, we are going to be one of the biggest landowners, bringing significant tax creation, job creation. But at the end of the day, these will be the employees and the neighbors of the project in the terminal. So it's extremely important that we engage directly and hear from them their ideas of how this can be a success for everybody.
And I know you're doing it. I know you're doing it well, and I know the community is responding. Listen, we're going to watch that closely. It's critically important for the state of Louisiana. It's critically important for the economy of the region. Brandy Christian, thanks for the work that you're doing. Keep it up.
Thank you.
That's a wrap, guys. Thanks for joining us. Join us again next week at this very same time for another edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.